Hi everyone, today we'll go through 5 questions from the Principles of Flight subject from the Airhead database together. We'll explain the answers and the surrounding topics regarding the question and additional answers. So without any further ado, let's jump into the first question. Consider a steady flow through a steam tube at a given constant velocity. An increase in the flow's temperature will. So in this kind of question, we have to pretty much assume that the pressure is maintaining constant. So here we have to decipher the principle, which essentially says that as the temperature increases, the density decreases. So, and the vice versa is true for the cold temperatures, where as the temperature decreases, the density will increase. So as the temperature increases, the density will decrease. In terms we have a constant velocity, so constant flow, this means that the mass flow will decrease. And that is the correct answer. Going into question number 2. Making an approach to land, the slats and flaps are deployed. One of the slats experiences a failure leading to a slat asymmetry. What is the most challenging aspect of the asymmetry? So in this question, the examiners are asking us about slat asymmetry. So of course, the two most common asymmetries will be flaps and slats. Remember that flaps are the high lift devices, however slats do not increase the coefficient of lift, they only increase the coefficient of drag. Slats do, however, increase the CL max, meaning the aircraft will stall at a higher angle of attack. They do not, however, change or increase the lift directly, meaning that if the slat is deployed asymmetrically, the drag will differ from one wing to another, meaning that during the slat asymmetry, the most challenging will be control in yaw because of the additional drag. And this question is slightly tricky because of the answer alpha, choice of speed to avoid a stall on the affected wing. This might seem correct, however, it is not particularly right. As we mentioned before, slats increase the CL max on the wing, which means that it stalls at a higher angle of attack, so lower speed. However, it can only be as an addition, meaning that the wing, a clean wing, will still stall at a normal VSO, which is more than sufficient, and the approach is always made at a safe speed. So this should not be a consideration. During the flight, you receive the above failure message on the aircraft's ECAM. What will be the effect on landing? So let's see at the picture. So here we can see that we have slats deployed. However, the flaps are locked in non-extended position. So you can see, essentially this question asks about what will happen if we land with a flapless or clean aircraft or in a flap configuration that is not particularly meant for landing, meaning we have too little flaps. So this happens relatively often, and during flight training you will experience this quite a lot, where during the landing with your instructor you will practice flapless landings or landings with flaps approach rather than the full flaps landing. The biggest difference when landing like this is that A, you will come with a slightly higher speed, and 2, you will have a slightly higher nose-up attitude as you touch the ground. This is not really dangerous, and this is not something that's very, very crazy in the aviation, as for example, sometimes if the wind is very strong, pilots do opt for landings with a lower flap configuration. Of course, this depends on the aircraft's type and the manual, so you hopefully always have to cross-check. In this particular question, let's read the possible answers. Reduced landing speed due to higher CL max, and a different flare method must be used. So the landing speed will be increased because our wing will be generating less lift. The configuration must be changed, as this is not a normal configuration for landing. If we have flaps locked, I would say that this configuration cannot be necessarily changed. And as this is not usual, it might not be completely unnormal configuration for landing. The landing will not be possible. Well, of course it is. We practice flapless landings, and sometimes when the aircrafts have a flap failure, you'll see that big airliners sometimes even land without any flaps. The aircraft will have a slightly higher speed on final approach and will have a larger risk of tail strike. So this question marks all the boxes. Like I said before, you need slightly higher speed because you're generating less lift, and also you'll have a higher nose up attitude to compensate for that loss of lift. So you'll generate a slightly higher angle of attack as you touch down, meaning you have a higher risk of tail strike. And that is the correct answer as well. Going into question number 4, M crit is increased by. So before we jump into the answers, the M crit, or the critical Mach number, is when the airflow around any part of the aircraft exceeds Mach 1. So the first shockwaves start to develop. Due to the design of the wing, the aircraft will go past the speed of sound slightly before actually Mach 1. So this is the beginning of the transonic region. So this can happen anywhere actually around Mach 0.8, 0.9, depending on the wing and aircraft design. So sweepback, area ruling, and high aspect ratio. In this case, no, the aspect ratio doesn't affect critical Mach number. Dihedral doesn't affect critical Mach number either. Sweepback, dihedral, and thin airfoils, and sweepback, thin airfoils, and area ruling. In this case, the last answer makes the most sense. Sweepback, as you might know, it increases the distance the air has to travel throughout the wing because the wings are at an angle. So there are vectors to the airflow rather than just going parallel through the airfoil, meaning the airflow will accelerate for more time to achieve its speed, decreasing the Mach number. Thin airfoils also, you can see that, for example, big fighter jets, they also have very thin airfoils, as this means that the camber gives the airflow less area to accelerate, meaning the airflow will be slower around the wing, comparing to airfoils with thick airfoils with thick leading edges. And lastly, area ruling, which is also called the Coke bottle effect. This is where the wings are attached to the fuselage, so you have this little dent inside. And this actually is also designed to decrease the speed of the airflow, increasing the critical Mach number, so where the airflow of the aircraft exceeds Mach 1. And this was also the correct answer. And lastly, an example of a combined lateral and directional periodic motion is A. So this question quite clearly refers to the Dutch roll. So the Dutch roll, by definition, is when an aircraft has a very strong lateral stability, but visibly weaker directional stability. If it was the opposite, we would call it a spiral instability, which is a tendency for an aircraft, or a high risk for an aircraft, to enter a spiral dive after a disturbance. In case of a Dutch roll, meaning the aircraft is thrown out of balance, for example, because of the gust, the dihedral effect makes the aircraft goes back as it's stable. But also remember that as the aircraft goes back, it means that the lower wing is generating more lift. And more lift also means more drag. So as it starts dragging, the aircraft will start yawing towards the lower wing, creating this motion in the directional axis. And if the directional stability is not strong enough, after the roll, the aircraft will start wobbling from side to side. This is quite dangerous, as in some extreme cases, the tail of an aircraft can even stall, making the pilots potentially lose all the control and leading to disaster. So in this case, this will be Dutch roll, and this is also why the aircrafts are fitted with yaw dampers, which are automatic devices on the tail preventing this to happen. And again, this is the correct answer. So this was just a quick walk through some of the questions from Principles of Flights. I hope you'll find it interesting and valuable, and I wish you all the best in tackling all the more questions with different subjects and Principles of Flights as well.